Hey, it's Paris. You know, I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me, serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
Make your next move with American Express Business Platinum. Enjoy complimentary access to the American Express Global Lounge Collection. And with a welcome offer of 150,000 points after you spend $20,000 on purchases on the card within your first 3 months of membership, your business can soar to new heights. Terms apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-platinum. Amex Business Platinum. Built for business by American Express.
I've never in my life seen anything like that. They stopped the crossing several times, and a couple of wildebeest were injured from jumping off the cliffs. I'm shaking. I'm f***ing furious.
What happens when one of the most spectacular wildlife events on Earth, the Great Migration River Crossings in East Africa, becomes too popular for its own good? A few weeks ago, a video went viral. You just heard a clip of it. The video showed more than 150 safari vehicles crowding a single wildebeest crossing in the Serengeti. The guide who filmed it, Nick Clear, called the scene disgraceful. The internet agreed, but the issue goes much deeper than one chaotic moment. I'm Jennifer Flowers, and this is View From Afar. Today we're asking, can the safari industry adapt before the very ecosystems it depends on begin to unravel? As part of an ongoing editorial series across audio, reporting, and future coverage, we'll be exploring what sustainable, inclusive safari travel and wildlife tourism could look like in the years ahead. That includes hearing from policymakers, local guides, community leaders, and others whose voices are crucial to this conversation. Today, I'm joined by two longtime leaders in conservation-driven safari travel. Nikki Fitzgerald, co-founder of Angama, and Joss Kent, CEO of And Beyond. Both have spent the better part of their lives building lodges in some of the most biodiverse, most vulnerable corners of sub-Saharan Africa. We'll talk about overtourism, the impact of social media, the influx of global hotel brands, political roadblocks, and whether safaris can remain safe for wildlife and landscapes while still being accessible. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here. I know it's been a dramatic season in the Serengeti Mara ecosystem, and I'm just so happy to have two individuals here with me today who have so much experience in the safari world, who can help us unpack what happened and think about best practices moving forward as a travel industry. I'd love for you to state your name, your title, and your organization, and just a one-liner on what you stand for.
Hi, Jen. I'm Nikki Fitzgerald, owner of Angama Mara and Angama Basili, two lodges in Kenya. I've been in the industry for 45 years, I think, and I'm now retired. So I'm sitting from the sidelines watching all this with interest. I still sit on my board. I'm still very much involved, but I'm not at the coalface of daily operations. And I've spent the last 45 years delighting guests to make a difference, hopefully.
Yeah, I'm Joss Kent. I'm the exec chairman and CEO of And Beyond. And I come from Kenya, so this is a very personal conversation, having watched this industry since I was small, kind of evolve and then being heavily involved in it for a long time, both sides of the border, both in Kenya and Tanzania. And basically at And Beyond, as Nikki knows well, because I kind of inherited her alma mater here, we try and leave the world a better place by just trying to protect the ecosystems that we can manage and show to guests, of which the Serengeti ecosystem is one major part.
So the river crossings in the Serengeti Mara ecosystem have been marketed as this pinnacle safari moment for decades. How do we get to this point where we're seeing 150 vehicles at one crossing, and who is responsible?
I don't think anybody in particular is responsible. It's just one of those wonderful experiences. It's become more accessible to more people over the years, and it's just a great draw card. So who is responsible? Is it the guest who comes? Is it the operator who operates? Is it the lodge who looks after them? Is it the guide that drives them? Is it the park authorities that need to do better? Is it the government who needs to do better? County government? So there's not one person responsible. We've all marketed this great phenomenon, and I'm talking particularly about the crossings at on the Mara River. The migration is a 12-month phenomenon, as we all know, but this particular extraordinary opportunity to see these animals in their tens of thousands cross the river, everybody wants to see it, and everybody should have a right to see it. So I don't think we should be pointing fingers at any one person in particular. I think we should be all looking at ourselves as what we've done and how we can fix it.
Obviously, no one's to blame, but the society we live in, and especially social media, does have a major part in this. I remember when I was growing up, there was only 3 TV channels. In fact, there was only one in Kenya, and that only came on at about 5 in the evening. But I remember Anglia productions, the old natural history productions, which are an hour and a half long. They're very slow. They took a long time to explain, for the migration, the entire ecosystem that does happen all year round. We've gone from that to kind of 7-second sound bites, whether it's on Instagram or social media or TikTok or whatever. And that 7-second dopamine hit is the migration crossing. And that has become the signifier of the migration. And the migration is so much bigger than that. And we can't control that. And there's no way you're going to change that. But I think in recent years, that has definitely intensified this focus that if you're coming in the high season, which we have always been trying to off-sell people coming in this high season, because there's a lot of other times, great times to be in the Mara or the Serengeti, that they perceive it unsuccessful if they booked a trip and they haven't seen a crossing. And that's not, I don't think, because the operators have sold it, that we can deliver a migration crossing if you book with us. But I think social media has purported that that's the only signifier of success.
There's so much more pressure from guides to deliver that experience or risk losing a client based on those perceptions and people demanding a certain thing. It would be great to just hear from both of you, what damage, visible and invisible, does this level of crowding cause for wildlife when we're focused on just one time of year and one specific action of this great migration that, to your point, is around 12 months a year?
Well, I think the obvious one is that too many vehicles are blocking the access points to the river. And with that, the animals become under stress. And then they start choosing the crossing points that are not suitable, jumping off cliffs, breaking their legs, drowning. Because they are under pressure, there's this natural urge to cross to the other side. And they will cross regardless, unless the vehicle's blocking completely. So I think the blocking of the access points to the river and then causing diversions, which do cause unnecessary harm and often death to the animals as they're trying to find a different way through. Joss, do you know why the grass is greener on the other side?
Well, it's hard to say now because obviously all the climate change issues have played havoc with the rain patterns across East Africa. Traditionally, they were crossing very much to get up to the early rains up in the Mara, which would come earlier than in the eastern or western Serengeti. And then they'd follow the rain back over. And so that was what they were positioning themselves to come across and get into this part of the Mara ecosystem first. That was traditionally the reason why they followed those patterns. The problem is, one, just density of vehicles, but then the other one is just the density of lodge sites and campsites and the monetization of national parks, which is a massive issue in its own right. Not just for Kenya and Tanzania, by the way. We see it across most of sub-Saharan Africa where the great wildlife national parks are, and there's only certain places that have been able to resist that kind of pressure to reduce the number of people going in. But I think those two are very much combined in adding to the pressure that then causes vehicles and lodges to be in the wrong place in parks that then interfere with natural migratory routes for all sorts of animals, not just the wildebeest.
Beyond the famous river crossings, where else are you seeing this pressure on the ecosystem? Is it just the river crossings, or are there other areas that travelers should be aware of?
Jen, it's every major sighting in a game reserve will have vehicles around it. I'm talking about in a national game reserve. The Masai Mara is a park that's owned by the people of Kenya. This is not private land. This is very much public land accessible to all, which I think is a good thing. The Kruger Park in South Africa is the same. If you're driving in the Kruger Park and there's a line to be seen, there will be 30, 40, 50 vehicles. So this is not specifically just to the Mara, in the Mara Serengeti, but any of the key iconic species, leopard, lion, cheetah, rhino, there will be pressure on those animals to view that animal, and not sadly to view it, but to get the award-winning shot with your iPhone. So it's not even using long lenses anymore and keeping a respectable distance. It's getting as close as possible to get that shot and putting the guides under enormous pressure to get closer to get the shot. So it happens across the board everywhere that I've been in, on government-owned land.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. Not for those people who don't know the kind of different types of land usage or management in Africa. At a very high level, you've got your national parks, which are the same as national parks in America or anywhere else. You've got community conservancies, which are usually adjacent to national parks. And Nikki has a camp in a community conservancy up in Amboseli. And they are separate from the national park, and they have their own administration and how they are managed, separate from the national park system. And then you've got fully private reserves, which are either owned by an individual or like Suyan, which is our new reserve up in Laikipia, is actually a Kenyan trust. So Suyan is owned ultimately by the Kenyan government, not by us, not by anyone. And the preservation and that can be done in a private environment. For this instance, in the Serengeti, we're talking about the national park system and the administration and management of the national parks. And to answer your question, it's not just Kenya and Tanzania. We see that pressure in Botswana, in certain parks. We see it in lesser in Mozambique because it's not that populated or popular right now. But pretty much all of the national park systems that are more well known are seeing this increasing pressure. It is only going one way at the moment.
So we're talking about national parks here, and I'm thinking about the government and what the government's role is in all of this. And from where you're sitting, what could governments do that would make a difference here, especially in light of this recent incident with the Serengeti crossing in Tanzania?
Well, I think for starters, they should be giving unconditional support for local park authorities. I think really to work together, firstly, to ensure there's a team of men and women in place who can look after these beautiful reserves, support them, and make sure that the park fees stay local and don't get filtered out into central government.
Yeah, I mean, definitely in terms of the sums that are spent by all operators, and not just big ones, but everyone, in terms of park fees into these systems is very, very large. And to put it bluntly, return on that investment is very, very small. And the problem is, fundamentally, one could easily say, well, we should disperse into lesser known national parks or into community conservancies or private reserves and get away from this. But the fact of the matter is, there's 140 sort of hope spots across Africa of key biospheres, of density of wildlife that really matter to the world. Believe it or not, about 34% of those are in Tanzania. And they're in the national parks. You can't just walk away and say, well, let's go somewhere else. I think that's an indication of failure. So one, we've got to try and work with the government to fix this. The second one is just, there was a great saying I was once told, which is a fish thinketh from the head. And that means if you put a dead fish out on a pavement in the sun, it starts to smell from the head. And I think government strategies around national parks, what do they actually want out of them? You've got lots of different examples in Africa, some good, some really bad, and I'm not going to pick names, but if they really to make this sustainable long term. And here's the divergence and dichotomy between what is deemed to be the commercial good outcome of monetizing national parks and the politics that go behind it, which is we need more money, we need more employment, and therefore we need more lodges, we need more licenses, actually is a very short-term strategy. And you end up destroying the thing you're trying to monetize. Trying to explain that to African governments is very, very difficult because obviously they do have a political lens through which they have to operate. And I get that entirely. It's not just in Africa. You look at any place in the world where over-tourism and overdevelopment got in the way of long-term strategy and planning. The Spanish coast, the Mediterranean coast of Spain, the classic one, destroyed pretty much all of it. And this will happen in Africa too if that course and trajectory has not changed. Tanzania and Kenya have a great opportunity to really say, we're not going to go down that road. And we're going to limit the number of lodge sites, and we're going to limit the vehicle density into these parks. And maybe we're going to increase park fees and make that some scarcity value on this. And we're going to invest more back into the parks than we are right now. Unfortunately, I've been operating for a long time in that East African ecosystem. I'm cynical as to whether there's a real desire at a government level to make this happen. But certainly from us as private operators, we'd love to see it happen because I think it's the only way you're going to make this area long-term sustainable.
So are either of you seeing good practices happening anywhere, be it Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Southern Africa? Is anyone doing it right? A couple of things were popping into my head. I was thinking about the Rwanda policy of $1,500 per person for an hour trekking with the gorillas, which is low volume, high impact tourism, or there's also the Masai Mara in Kenya that recently increased fees from $100 per person to $200 per person to enter the park. Are these making a difference? Are you seeing other examples of best practices?
I checked in on the facts of this doubling of park fees, and it has made a difference in the Mara in 2024 high season and continues to in 2025. There has been a drop in tourists coming in, and there has been an increase in park fees. So that is a good thing. Now, my question is, are we verging towards elitist tourism? Because that's pretty much where Rwanda's gone. You see all the lodges now all top end. And look, I'm unashamedly elitist, but it does bother me that all these beautiful places are going to really only be kept for people who can afford to get there. And this doesn't take into account Kenya nationals because they have access to their parks at domestic park fee levels, which are very affordable and very digestible and should remain as such. So that's a given. But when it comes to international visitors, is it only the very wealthy that are going to be able to see a gorilla, stay in a beautiful 5-star lodge and pay $1,500 per gorilla trek? That bothers me as well. And obviously a great chunk of the business in East Africa, out of Arusha and out of Nairobi, is the wheels business, where operators don't own beds. They just own many, 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 many vehicles, and they need to fill these vehicles and push them into these parks. So they're really only coming in for 3 months of the year, and then they're going away again. But they are bringing in guests at a much more affordable rates. So how do we find this balance between keeping these parks just for those who can afford it and making sure that everybody has a chance to see them? And I'm talking internationally, because locally, I'm happy to say that domestic tourism is strong in the Mara. In my country of South Africa, the Kruger Park thrives on South Africans going there to see their park. But we can keep pushing those park fees. And Quechua and Angama guests can afford to pay for them, but it'll become a breaking point where guests staying in other lodges can't. Now that impacts on those lodges, impacts on their business, impacts on the staff that work there. So it is a fine balance. We dance between raindrops on this matter of keeping these beautiful places just for people who can afford to go there.
I think there's a really good middle ground. You asked what's happened in Kenya. I mean, as Nikki knows well, these crossing videos like the one that led to this podcast have been happening all the time and regularly. Overcrowding at crossing sites, unregulated on both sides of the border. But in Kenya, the government and the Mara Conservancy itself reacted to that. And so it wasn't just, I think, the increase in park fees. It was, right, we're going to increase park fees. We're going to control this better. We actively manage the situation. It's definitely improved on the Kenyan side of the border by that active management. We've seen Kitchetembo's much lower price than Angama or Batala Camp, which is the higher price camp that sits next to it. We've seen the volumes of guests drop off. And that's fine in a way, depending on what the landing point is. And I think there's other places in the world that have shown a way that way, because we operate in Bhutan as well. We have a camp up in Punakabali in Bhutan. Watching Bhutan's government policy of restricting access, making you really want to come. If you want to come, you're going to have to save some money. So it isn't just for the rich. And I kind of believe in that philosophy is, it can't be open systems to everyone. I totally take Nikki's point that for local citizens, we've got to get more of them into the parks so they can see this across all of Africa. So put that aside, but these places are very valuable, and you can't allow just free access where it overrides all the resources, that there isn't some strategy around resource allocation, around vehicle density, lodge densities, draws on all of the resources that take to run those. And so I do think that the increase in park fees, if it's combined with much tighter government regulations and policies that are actually enforced, and that's a different matter, that tightening and the exclusivity piece, without becoming totally exclusive, is a good thing. It has to be in the long run.
This goes back to government regulation. And when Nick was talking about what was going on in that area, he was saying, for the most part, all these rangers, like there were a lot of people who were on the other side of the river who couldn't even do anything because there just wasn't enough manpower on the ground to help manage situations. Do you have any insight into Tanzania's resources here? Is it they're not doing enough, or is it that they just can't? They just don't have the resources?
In Tanzania, you've got quite a few problems coming together because you have so many sites in the Serengeti that were meant to be mobile camps. And most of them now have been turned into full infrastructure fixed camps across the whole migratory corridor of the migration. And that's accelerating, by the way. So you have this absolute proliferation in the number of lodges that then adds lots of vehicle flow into it. You've got unregulated guide training for the huge number of what Nikki called the wheels business out of Arusha, and it's vast. These are fleets of 200, 300 Land Cruisers. But on top of that, with the internet, you've got now another 300 independent operators who only have one vehicle or two vehicles. And they may not even be the person who's driving it. They've hired someone else to drive it. It's like an Uber, a Safari. That's the reality. And so if you combine lots of these fixed lodges and then you get untrained, unsupervised guides, hundreds of vehicles, all selling the Instagram moment in the 1 month or 2 weeks of the year, and their only income comes from producing that shot, you have limited resources from TMAPA and the inability to be in all these places at once, and an underfunded number of rangers specifically around the migration. You've got a burning cauldron here of an issue, right, which leads to the video. In my view, that they're all component parts of it on the Tanzania side.
Running a business means I wear lots of hats. Luckily, when it's time to put on my hiring hat, I can count on LinkedIn to make it easy. I can post a job for free or pay to promote it and get 3 times more qualified candidates. Imagine finding your next great hire in 24 hours. 86% of small businesses do. With LinkedIn, I can also easily share my job with my network. No other job site lets me do that. Post your free job at linkedin.com/achieve. That's linkedin.com/achieve. Terms and conditions apply.
With a major selection of the looks your kiddos love starting at just $4 in the Walmart app, a new school year means a stylish new them. Who knew? Find skater skirts and Crocs that say, I'm casual but cool. Sparkly sneakers that say, it's my classroom, you're just learning in it. And preppy polos that say, I'm the teacher's pet, even if they're mommy's menace at home. Find their favorite styles starting at just $4 in the app. The Walmart you thought you knew is now new.
Who says you can't be the topic of conversation for all the right reasons? The Hyundai Tucson Hybrid pairs bold presence with advanced technology and sleek style. It's everything you didn't know you needed in an SUV and then some. Okay, Hyundai. Visit HyundaiUSA.com to learn more.
So every lodge in this region, legacy or new, benefits from the Great Migration, of course. There are headline-making investments right now, though, all over sub-Saharan Africa, which is kind of adding a new twist to things. Most notably in the Masai Mara, the Ritz-Carlton just opened, and it's actually facing a lawsuit right now that claims that the lodge obstructs a key migration path for the wildebeest. And there are questions about whether an environmental impact assessment took place. The lodge has put out a statement saying they have all the necessary permits and the case is still shaking out as we speak, but it does raise an interesting question about the growing number of camps and lodges in the region, more of them from big global brands. Do you believe these big global brands have a place in this landscape?
This is called personal brand suicide because, if I'm going to say something about global flags coming in, it's going to sound like sour grapes because a new lodge is coming in and I didn't get a chance to bid on that site and da-da-da. In my view, I don't mind anybody who comes in. The more top-end lodges, the better, because top-end lodges invariably employ a lot of people. We have 160 staff looking after 60 guests at Angama Mara. That's proper. That's 160 staff, 12 months of the year, looking after their families. If you're looking after guests at a high rate, you need to have lots of people to do that. And that has to be a good thing. And jobs are the most precious asset where we are. Anybody wants is to earn a living, to look after their family. So if we can use our industry to create jobs and opportunity, and obviously from that benefits flow into communities, conservation, all those good things. But let's just start with jobs. I don't mind where a lodge is built as long as there is rigor around, firstly, the tender process of the site, and of the environmental accreditation process. It takes forever. And in my experience with both Angamas, we didn't turn a sod of earth until every piece of paper was in place. And by the way, the certification process, it's called NEMA in Kenya, is really nice to work with. They come and they look and they ask questions. Not only do they look to see environmentally if this is the right place and where's your box and the water and the this and everything else, but they also talk to community members. Does this operator tick the boxes of being a good member of your community? So the process is good. But according to Professor Ole Depash, who's raised this issue about the Ritz-Carlton, now I'm just reading what he's writing. The question is, was due process, did it happen? That shouldn't have happened anywhere. If there is a NEMA certification, you need to get that certification. And it needs to be correctly done. And if it's correctly done and lodges are built in the correct place and good employment and good community practices and conservation practices, that has to be a good thing for everybody. But it's Africa and things slip and slide and happen. So we'll see. So that's my view on new lodges. I'm all for new lodges. We were the second lodge probably to go into the Amboseli ecosystem at the top end. The Elawana Lodge Tortillas was there first, followed by Ngama Amboseli, followed by Abercrombie and Kent are building a lovely lodge there now. And I'm hoping my good neighbors from and beyond will come and build a lodge there too, because that's really good for Amboseli to get more top-end lodges there, because generally we employ more, we train better, we are also being tall poppies. We have to make sure that our credentials of giving back are immaculate, not just greenwashing. And by the way, it's not only the right thing to do as a part of a community, but from a commercial perspective, it's absolutely imperative that you do all these investments. When it comes to the flags, we've been very proud of the fact that we, as safari lodge operators, are rather unique. We're usually cast as a bunch of crazies because nobody in their right minds would go and operate where we operate. With all the challenges that happen every day, starting with the safety of our guests, let's just start with that. I've lost guests. Joss, have you lost any guests? I've lost 2 in my career to animals. So there's a whole bunch of challenges you face operating there. And if you look at all the people who've grown this industry, they're all huge characters and they run these rather charming places, and it's stories around the fireside and the stories grow with the telling, and the chances are that the lights won't work one night and there's going to be hippo poo in the water the next day. And it has never felt like a hotel. It's one thing we are passionately not. We are not hotels. We are safari lodges and we do things differently. And I think there's a certain charm to that. And I think guests love that. So I would hate for that rather unique Africanness to be lost in the flags. And I understand that flags have got brand standards. I went to stay at one of the flag lodges and my heart stopped when I was given an electronic key card. Well, in my wildest dreams, I never thought I'd hold an electronic key card to go into a tent. If the flags can reinvent themselves as lodge operators, great. But if they hotelify what we do, that makes me sad. Joss, you were born and brought up at Kitchener as a little boy. Tell me what you think about the flags.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we can ever say that we shouldn't allow flags into the safari industry, because I think that would be a ridiculous statement. But I fully agree with Nikki. What concerns me is what's the intent? And by that I mean whether it's Ngama or and beyond. As I said, our true intent is to try and leave the world a better place, employ well, deliver shared value for communities, protect the ecosystems we're in. We have to produce great experiences to pay for it. We're a for-profit conservation company. We're not underwritten as Ngama. They're not underwritten by billionaire benefaction. We spend $541 per guest per night on impact. That's $54 million in total this last calendar year, June to June, in and beyond. And there's lots of strata about what the impact is. In there are some park fees, but there's a whole range of other things that are not in there. But that's our intent. That's the true north that drives us to create really great guest experiences that change people's lives and preserve ecosystems. Now, if you're really cynical, you'd say, what's the intent around large branded flag hotel companies? You've got 2 interests. You've got one is a property developer who just wants return. And then you have the flag, which is a hotel company that is a publicly listed company that needs to create return. Now, obviously, you've got some great examples of hotel companies that have great sustainability standards. And so this isn't some sort of blanket statement around global hospitality brands and their commitment to sustainability, but it's very different from the safari industry and what drives either owner-operator or small number of lodges owned by one person, or even the bigger companies where we're one of the biggest. And so the intent is, where does that lead you? And I think what you're seeing out of the Ritz-Carlton saga is the intent has bypassed the process somehow, because that's what happens in Africa. You have formal and you have informal. When there's a lot of money involved, things happen. And they don't happen the way they should happen. And again, if you're cynical, if you look at Marriott in particular, you just have to look at the shareholder calls on Marriott. What's driving the executive team at Marriott? It's not saving Africa. It's how do you get off your balance sheet 2.4 million Envoy points that can't be spent because they've earned them in city hotels in Ohio, and they don't want to go back to the city hotel in Ohio with their families to spend the points. So they're going into lodges and experiences because that's actually where people want. And that's very cynical, but I think there's something in it. What are they actually trying to do in our industry that has a potential to end at the wrong place if they don't understand the responsibility that comes from operating these ecosystems? If they really understand the responsibility, they're very welcome.
Yeah, and it is an interesting question. Like, are those lodges going to be filled in the off season, or is it just going to be in that really hectic time of year during the crossings?
I mean, I can see Nikki shaking her head. The problem is no. And we have all fought for decades, not just here, but in Botswana as well, where you have this mass peak around the floodwater. And it's not just in the safari industry. You look at, we operate in India and Nepal. Everest Base Camp is completely overrun when there's a huge number of fantastic walking trails in the Annapurna area that are off-piste walking. Why? Because everyone wants the bragging rights. They want the one photo. And that is the problem. So part of this is marketing and social media. But no, the harsh reality is the seasonality has just got worse and worse rather than better than better. It'll be too late when they find out that the supply-demand imbalance has tipped over. As you see prices come down, lodges empty, staffing gets reduced, tipping gets reduced, all the shared value pieces start to drain, but you still have all the draw on the resources.
So apropos of just thinking about the migration and how we see it, when we see it, like if you could start from scratch and say, this is how I advise that we encourage visitors to see the migration, what would that look like?
Firstly, we have this wonderful convergence of the Northern Hemisphere summer holidays and the Mara River crossings, and that's never going to change. So that's a fact. That's the European and American summer, and that's when people travel. If I could start all over again, I'd say, please, can the migration come into Kenya in February, March, April, and May? It would be too wonderful. It's not going to happen, obviously. So I think from that point of view, that's a given. I have been told, Joss, you probably know better than I, that in the southern Serengeti during the calving season in February and March, same thing is happening. So it used to be nobody down there watching the calving. Apparently now it's the same crush. My favorite time, if I was ever asked, went to see the migration. I love it when they're in the southern Serengeti, they've had their babies and they're moving towards Nabi Gate, and then those great open grasslands of the Serengeti, and they're going single file slowly up through those open grasslands. Once they start getting to the woodlands in northern Serengeti, not my favorite time. And then obviously when they tip back into Kenya is wonderful. And then November, December, when they start coming back down again, that's another lovely time to catch them when they're coming down through the Morocopis in Tanzania. So there are many times to see the migration. Look, a crossing is extraordinary, but it is just one day in your entire safari. So maybe just don't come in July, August, and September, and come other months of the year and find the migration wherever it is, or just look at the beauty of the Serengeti Mara ecosystem. My God, there are animals wall to wall 365 days of the year.
To your point, Nikki, I think there's something about the magic of just letting nature unfold, whether it is during the crossings calving season, whether it is not during those times at all. you do not know when something amazing is going to happen. It is entirely up to that landscape and the wildlife to reveal itself. And in some of the most unexpected moments, I've had my most incredible encounters with wildlife in the landscape. And I think going with that mindset of openness, that this is not a movie, this is not a Hollywood movie, this is nature, I think is a key one. Joss, I'd love for you to comment on this as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the summer holidays is a problem. You're not going to change that. But in an ideal world, what would you be doing? You would be marketing all year round migration between the two countries, or not even migration. I mean, the migration is only one piece of what you see in Kenya and Tanzania. And I've never been on safari in Kenya, in those national parks and not seen amazing game all year round. Whether it's in the high rains of April, the Mara is still fantastic in April. So it's broader marketing. And then all the other things we talked about, less is more. Restricted, well-managed lodge site and camp density across the whole ecosystem, with much better cross-border cooperation between Kenya and Tanzania, which can be bitty in parts. Sometimes it's going well and sometimes it's not. But the wildlife doesn't know a border. And that coordination is really critical, especially on that Kenya-Tanzania piece of the ecosystem. Guide training. Absolutely far more discipline and licensing and proper enforcement and training and testing before anyone is allowed in any vehicle to get into any national park. But they have the FAGASA system, obviously, in South Africa, and the Kenya Guide Association have got some very good training programs up in Kenya. Now, they have enforcement issues in Kenya, so they're not devoid of this. But the Tanzania piece is not as in control.
So one thing I wanted to tackle today is social media. We've brought it up numerous times over the course of this conversation, and of course, it's the reason we're talking today. It can inspire conservation. It can inspire people who have never thought about going to sub-Saharan Africa to go. It can also put the industry under a harsh spotlight, and sometimes without justification. Joss, I know you had a guide and vehicle at the Serengeti crossing Nick Clear recorded, and Beyond got caught in the crossfire. How does social media play a role in helping or hurting here?
We were involved in this incident because we had a vehicle there. And so this is, this whole discussion point is very personal, because obviously when I saw that, and rightly, Nick voiced what is a company like Beyond having a vehicle there, I was quite shocked. When I investigated, it turns out that our guide actually did everything right. He followed not only the national guidelines, but the Serengeti guidelines and the Beyond guiding kit to the letter. He ended up where he needed to be to see the crossing safely, and then was crowded by 60 to 100 vehicles. They boxed him in. He couldn't get out. Our guests didn't get out of the vehicles. We reported it. The other vehicles that came from Beyond saw it and reported it and went away, which is the right thing to do. And so I was fully ready at that point when Nick got in touch saying, what's going on, Joss? To find the guide at fault, in which case there would have been serious repercussions very, very quickly. But the reality was we had a guide who followed to the book. And so I'm not prepared to let him get rolled over by social media either. It's not his responsibility to manage the parks or the government, but it is our responsibility as a big brand, just as Angama is a big brand, to speak up loudly when we think our voice can be a voice of influence. When you take a short-term view and you say more is more and more is better, it ends up destroying what you actually set out to create. And you have to row back from that. And I think the Tanzania government must quickly row back from that if you're to see it stabilize between Tanzania and Kenya. As Nikki knows, it's just an amazing thing that I'd like everyone to be able to experience the right way, not this way. This way is no good.
It's all a question of personal responsibility. You've got to, whatever you do it responsibly. I'll give you an example. There was another video that came out. This was after Nick's video, about a whole bunch of cars in the Mara rushing towards the river. And the private guide who actually filmed this was in a vehicle in the rushing. He didn't get to the spot he wanted to get to. So in a fit of pique, he posted on social media, oh my God, look what's happening in the Mara now. Now look at the behavior. He was in one of the vehicles. And that's, for me, completely irresponsible. Nick was standing on one side of the river, filming on the other side of the river. That's a different matter. But when you're in it, and now you're thinking, okay, well, I must also have my say now. Nick's got 2 million views on his clip. Let me see if I can get the same kind of traction on my clip. That was irresponsible. I have been called in my time Karen of the Crossings. I have named and shamed vehicles on the other side of the Mara River, but I've only ever done it myself, not my guides, not my lodge managers, me, from CEO to CEO, with photographic evidence, quietly, calmly, write to the CEO and say, I was at the river at this time, this is the photograph I took, this is your vehicle, this is the registration number, and this is what the vehicle and or what the guests were doing. And every time I've got a fantastic letter back from the owner of that wheels business in Nairobi saying, Nikki, thank you so much. We've taken up with the guide. Now, have they or haven't they? I don't know. But it was quietly done. It wasn't done in a sensational way. It wasn't named and shamed publicly. It was company to company, CEO to CEO saying, this is what's happening. How on earth can the owners of these big wheels companies sitting in Nairobi know what all those 200-300 vehicles are doing every day? They simply can't. So it's up to the lodges who operate there. They are at the coalface every day with their guiding team to ensure best behavior from guides. And by the way, backing the guides to get best behavior from guests. And that means explain to the guests what's going to happen today and to give the guides that confidence to say to the guests, I'm going to endeavor to get a crossing for you. Hopefully we'll see a crossing. Once we've seen the crossing, we will pull out so somebody else can come in. And by the way, if we sit there for 2 or 3 hours and there isn't a crossing, we will pull out so somebody else can come in and we will go to the megahertz and we'll try again tomorrow. So it is a partnership between guide and guest, and it's a partnership between travel agent, lodge guide, and guest, a 3-way conversation saying this is the right way to view the migration. And not to sit there for 12 hours and push and shove fistful of dollars in front of the guide saying, push, 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 come, get closer, get closer.
Yeah, I wish I could say that we could control social media, but every consumer has a choice to do the research and understand who they are buying this experience from. If it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true, especially on safari. And so if it matters to you that you want to do this correctly, then choose your operator wisely. Whether they're the tour operator, whether they're the DMC, whether they're a lodge operator, just do a bit of research and quickly find out if there's any depth to their background. I think AI will help, funnily enough. 10-second perplexity search request on a particular operator or some advice that I want to see the migration and I want to do it responsibly. Now tell me how I might be able to do that better is a good 5 seconds of your life. Because it will give you the answers, and you could do it after this call. It comes out with some interesting answers, and it's not wrong.
So what is at stake if we don't get this right in the next decade? If we don't figure out how to work with private public sector, figuring out how to manage these landscapes, like what happens?
I fear for a push towards elitist tourism. I think as the stakes get higher, the prices will go up. On park fees and things like that, because that's the only way. I think there are other ways of managing it, but I worry that it'll just be, oh, well, okay, we're still getting X 100,000 visitors to the Mara over this peak season. If we whack it to $300, let's see what happens. We still get the same amount of money, probably more, but less wheels. But guests want to come, and I think they will find those dollars to come. And the amount of money that is going down, Jen, every day, if you just do the sums of what's flowing into county and country coffers every day through park fees, and I can say I only know what my park fees are. From the 1st of July to the 31st of December this year, so guests that have traveled and guests that are due to travel for the next few months, we would have channeled $916,000 into the Mara coffers. And that goes to county government and to central government. But one little 30-bedroom lodge is nearly $1 million in 6 months. Can you imagine the sheer volume of dollars that is coming through the system? And the more dollars that come in, more snots in the trough, more people that need to feed off them, more harder it is to manage. So I worry that with the money, it'll just get worse before it gets better. I pray it'll get better. I think we can manage behavior better. Absolutely. I think there's a way of, as Josh said, we've got guide training, guest training, critical to train guests, train travel partners, train guides, and support local government and local authorities in managing these camps. But let's see. And Africa is not Barcelona or Venice. There's a whole different set of rules out in Africa where there's a lot of catching up to do. This is our time now to get a share of the chunk of those dollars. So the pressures are different. It's not like we can stand there with a placard saying, we hate tourists, go home. It's not going to happen. On the contrary, it'll be, we love tourists, send more. I will leave it to the youngsters. Even though I see Mr. Kent is starting to get a little bit grey around the sideburns.
Right.
What is that?
Maybe it's these issues.
I didn't notice. I saw you in May. You weren't quite as grey. What's happening?
Oh no, this and that, Nikki. This and that.
So I have to leave it to the braver, fitter, younger, cleverer, smarter operators to really just be the best you can be every day, and hopefully off that it'll snowball. So if our guides can be the best they can be every day, and how they're behaving at a sighting, at a crossing, if that'll just impact the next guide, all we can do is control what we do.
I completely agree, Nikki. Your own ethics, and you can only, as a CEO of a company, I've got to sleep as well as I want to sleep. And so this stuff is really, really important to me, personally, really important to me. So we can do what we want, but we also, as bigger brands, we do have a chance to influence and to cajole and to assist and help, whether it's community conservancies, private reserves, or governments, to change course, to understand the ramifications of what happens if you don't control this. And how do we get to a point that it is much more balanced, more managed, without getting to elitist tourism? That would be great, right? You've got the best of both worlds. But right now it's slightly out of control. And maybe this has been a brilliant catalyst to bring people together to have a conversation.
If the traveler takes away one idea from this conversation, or an advisor, or anyone who is listening, what is it? What is the most important thing we've talked about today in your eyes?
Come to Africa before you go anywhere else. That would be my first advice. And my second is to echo what Josh said, is just do your research. There's so much out there, starting with travel advisors, starting with internet, with Perplexity, whatever. Just do your research and make sure that by the time you've made that decision, every dollar that you're spending on this trip is going to be really well spent, whether it's at the bottom end, the middle end, or the top end. But just do your research and hang with the good guys. And there are lots of us, making sure that this beautiful business we're in will sustain for always.
I think I can add much to that. I think Nikki's completely correct. Really do your research and then hold everyone accountable against that research. If you bought something from and beyond and what you see on the ground isn't what you thought you were going to get, then call me.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of View From Afar. In the show notes, you'll find links to And Beyond, Ungama, and my full interview with Safari Guide Nick Clear. Ready for more Views from Afar? Visit afar.com and be sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. We're at Afar Media. If you enjoyed today's exploration, I hope you'll come back for more great stories. Subscribing always makes that easy. And be sure to rate and review the show on your favorite podcast platforms. This podcast is part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to their other fine shows like Culture Kids and the Explorers Podcast. This has been View From Afar, a production of Afar Media. The podcast is produced by Aislinn Green and Nikki Galteland with special assistance from Jennifer Flowers.